Let's get straight into it. History is often presented as a series of deliberate actions, a grand chess game played by kings, generals, and scientists who see the board clearly. But just as often, its course is violently altered by a simple, profound mistake. A misread map, a misunderstood word, or a failed experiment can redirect the flow of events in ways no one could have predicted, leading to wars, empires, and innovations that define the modern world. Number 1. The Charge of the Light Brigade. This disastrous 1854 cavalry charge during the Crimean War wasn't an act of strategic madness, but the result of a fatally vague order. The British commander, Lord Raglan, intended for his light cavalry to prevent the Russians from removing captured naval guns from a different position. His order, however, was poorly worded and verbally relayed. From the cavalry commander's perspective, on the valley floor, the only guns visible were the main Russian artillery battery at the far end of the valley. The order to, quote, follow the enemy and try to prevent the enemy carrying away the guns was tragically misinterpreted as a command to charge directly into a well-defended artillery position, a suicidal run immortalized by poetry. Number 2. The War of the Stray Dog. In October 1925, a minor border incident spiraled into a brief but real war between Greece and Bulgaria. The misunderstanding began when a Greek soldier ran across the border, reportedly while chasing after his runaway dog. A Bulgarian sentry, seeing an armed soldier cross the frontier, followed protocol and shot him. The ensuing confusion and anger led to a series of escalating skirmishes, culminating in a full-scale Greek invasion of a portion of Bulgaria. The League of Nations had to intervene to condemn the invasion and order a ceasefire, proving that sometimes international conflict can be triggered by something as mundane as a man trying to retrieve his pet. Number 3. The First Italo-Ethiopian War. This conflict was ignited not on a battlefield but in the fine print of a treaty. The 1889 Treaty of Wuchale was meant to formalize relations between Italy and Ethiopia. However, a critical discrepancy existed between the Italian and Amharic language versions of Article 17. The Italian text stated that Ethiopia was obliged to conduct all its foreign affairs through Italian authorities, effectively making it an Italian protectorate. The Amharic version, which the Ethiopian Emperor Menelik II had signed, merely suggested that Ethiopia could use Italy's good offices if it so chose. When Italy began asserting a level of control that Ethiopia had never agreed to, the misunderstanding led directly to a war that ended in a decisive Ethiopian victory. Number 4. Christopher Columbus's voyages. The discovery of the Americas was predicated on a colossal mathematical error. Columbus was not a lone genius who believed the Earth was round while others thought it flat. That was a common understanding among educated Europeans. His mistake was in his calculation of the planet's size. He dramatically underestimated the Earth's circumference and believed the distance from Europe westward to the East Indies was much shorter than it actually was. When he landed in the Bahamas, his misunderstanding was so profound that he was convinced he had reached the outskirts of Asia, a belief he held for the rest of his life, forever calling the indigenous peoples Indians. Number 5. The War of 1812. This is a rare case of a war that was declared for reasons that had already vanished. A primary cause for the United States declaring war on Great Britain was the British practice of restricting American trade and impressing its sailors. In response to American pressure, the British government did, in fact, repeal the contentious trade restrictions. The problem was communication. The news of the repeal, sent by sailing ship, took weeks to cross the Atlantic. By the time the message arrived, the U.S. Congress, unaware of the policy change, had already formally declared war, setting in motion a conflict that could have been entirely avoided. Number 6. Penicillin. The world's first mass-produced antibiotic was born from a combination of a messy lab and a lucky vacation. In 1928, bacteriologist Alexander Fleming returned to his laboratory after being away and noticed that one of his petri dishes, which had been accidentally contaminated with a mold, showed something strange. The bacteria he had been cultivating were unable to grow in the area surrounding the mold. He hadn't set out to find an antibacterial agent. He was studying Staphylococci. His genius was in not dismissing the contaminated failed experiment, but in understanding the significance of what he was seeing, a mold that was actively killing bacteria. Number 7. The microwave oven. In 1945, an engineer named Percy Spencer was working on radar equipment for the company Raytheon. While testing a new high-powered vacuum tube called a magnetron, he noticed that a chocolate bar in his pocket had started to melt. His initial thought wasn't about a new cooking device. It was curiosity about why this military-grade hardware was cooking his snack. He then famously tested his hypothesis with popcorn kernels and an egg, which promptly exploded. The misunderstanding was in the perceived purpose of the technology. A device designed to detect enemy bombers was accidentally repurposed into one of the most common kitchen appliances in the world. Number 8. Post-it notes. The ubiquitous sticky square is the result of a spectacular failure. In 1968, a scientist at 3M named Dr. Spencer Silver was trying to create a super-strong adhesive for the aerospace industry. Instead, he accidentally formulated the exact opposite, a bizarrely weak, low-tack adhesive that could be easily removed without leaving residue. It was a solution without a problem. For years, the invention languished until a colleague, Art Fry, grew frustrated with the paper bookmarks he used for his church hymnal constantly falling out. He remembered Silver's weak glue, applied it to a piece of paper, and in 1974, the first Post-it note was born from a failed experiment and a choir singer's annoyance. Number 9. The implantable pacemaker. In 1956, engineer Wilson Greatbatch was building a device to record heart sounds. Reaching into a box for a component, he accidentally grabbed the wrong-sized resistor, one that was 100 times more powerful than the one he needed. When he installed it and turned the device on, it didn't just record sound. It began to emit a steady, rhythmic electrical pulse, one that perfectly mimicked the human heartbeat. Greatbatch immediately recognized the potential. His simple mistake, grabbing the wrong tiny part, directly led to the creation of the first successful implantable pacemaker, a device that has since saved millions of lives. Number 10. Saccharin. The first artificial sweetener was discovered because a chemist had poor lab hygiene. In 1878, Konstantin Fahlberg was working at Johns Hopkins University on derivatives of coal tar. After a long day in the lab, he went home to dinner without washing his hands. When he picked up a piece of bread, he noticed it was unusually sweet. He traced the sweetness back to his own hands and, returning to his lab, began tasting the various chemicals he had been working with, a practice that is now profoundly forbidden. He eventually isolated the source, a compound he named saccharin, which was hundreds of times sweeter than sugar and had been created completely by accident. From wars sparked by lost dogs and bad translations to life-saving inventions born from melted chocolate and messy labs, these moments reveal a fundamental truth. Progress is not always a planned march forward. It is often a chaotic stumble, where the most significant leaps are made not by design, but by a misunderstanding, an error, or the simple recognition of a happy accident.